Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through the Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are well. This is a pre-election special. Tomorrow Scotland goes to the polls, as you all know. Well, at least I hope you do, although from what I'm hearing, a lot of people are known about it and not going to do anything about it, but it is happening. There is an election tomorrow, the 7th, and we will have a new government. By probably Sunday we'll know about it, Saturday, Sunday, depending how quick the count goes. And it's been quite a campaign. If I could start with you, Eva, you've been in, if I could I just say, again, I've said it a few times and I'll keep saying it, the amount of work that you and Hazel in particular put in, but everyone associated with Alliance To Liberate Scotland couldn't have done more in the short space of time. But I hope you make it without falling asleep before when the polls open. How I don't want to say it sounds terrible. How has it been for you, Doll? How's the election been for you, Eva?
Oh, the earth moved. I wish I'd had more time just to speak to people and particularly listen to people. But in what I've done, when I have been able to get out and listen to folk, they're all saying the same kind of stuff, that they're scunnered with party politics. They switch off the telly when they're not throwing something at it. When question time or debate night come on, and they watch party politicians sparring and jousting with each other, seemingly forgetting that they're there to represent the people and they should prioritise the needs and the wishes and the expectations of the people. So I've said before, there is a huge malaise in politics, and I stand by that. And that's why I hope that sufficient numbers of people believe that Alliance To Liberate Scotland is a breath of fresh air coming into that fairly polluted atmosphere that party politics became, particularly in the course of the last few years, when we saw a lot of stupid decisions being made in Holyrood because people were loyal for the sake of self-enrichment or reward, and far many more of them should have been outspoken, such as, for example, Fergus Ewing and the manner that he was, or indeed Ash Regan when she resigned. But the reception I've had has been mainly very positive, simply because I'm reasonably well known locally, partly because of a big family, and partly because so does Matt. And most of the folk that we've met that we've got really into proper conversations with know one or other of us or a relative, because it's Clackmannanshire and Dunblane. Everybody knows everybody else, and what you don't know you make up. But beyond that, the general feeling is a small and very disappointing, and frankly, if it turns out to be accurate, disastrous aspect is the level of support for reform. It's not huge, but it shouldn't be there at all. There is no support for Labour as far as I can tell. People are disillusioned with the behaviour of Starmer, and they don't want to watch and see pan out arguments between Starmer and Sarwar, because they know perfectly well that Starmer is pulling Sarwar's strings. There's a massive amount of disquiet amongst men as well as women about the fallout from gender recognition reform, and they don't trust Labour, who've said that they'll roll back on it. They don't trust it for a minute for innumerable reasons. There's disappointment with the SNP amongst the genuine independent supporters, because what many of them were saying to me was either we'll give them one more chance, or they were the extreme, polar opposite, and saying how many chances do they need? They don't have a credible plan. They cannot keep going back, repeating the same thing over and over again. So my hope is that come polling day, that when folk are in the ballot box, they'll really take very, very seriously their public and personal duties and obligations to consider what it is that they're doing. Because many people hate politics. They don't want involved with politicians. They despise them. And with just cause in many cases. But when you are voting, you've got 2 votes. So for your lilac paper for the constituency, vote for the person that you think has independence as their core value. And obviously, in my constituency, I hope that you'll believe that that's me. But when you come to your list vote, vote for your country. Vote for your country. Treat it as if it was the 2014 referendum being rerun. Consider that 2014 was a dress rehearsal, and this time, if you vote for the Alliance to Liberate Scotland, especially in the region, you've got the real chance, not a once-in-a-lifetime chance, but a real chance to turn things around for Scotland, not just because independence would be a positive development for the country, but because the price of the union is far too high. And not just in purely monetary or financial terms, or theft of our resources, or the fact that we put far more into Westminster than we get back or we see the benefit of, but because the way that the United Kingdom operates now is such that people have low aspirations. They worry about the cost of living crisis, which to a great extent is created and fabricated by the Westminster government, who've multiple measures to deal with it that they don't use. They prefer to spend money on, again, weapons of mass destruction. But overwhelmingly, there's a feeling that folk have lost hope. And I don't want to be somebody who gives folk false hope. But the hope of independence is a very positive thing, because when our country is independent, and that will only happen with unity, unification, and a better together approach to the independence question, when that happens, there might be a bit of belt tightening at the beginning, but in a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, there'll be children running about Scotland who have never known anything other than an independent Scotland. Just like just now, there's teenagers who never knew anything other than devolution, my own boy being one of them. Or he's not a teenager, but you know what I mean. So it's time to grasp the thistle and to vote with your heart and to have a belief in the people of this country and self-belief that we can do this thing and do it properly and turn around all these unnecessary decades of austerity and want and deprivation and make Scotland the country we know that we can be.
Absolutely. Greg, this is your first election campaign, and I've got to say you've worked very hard and you've been an absolute ray of hope and sunshine in the group. How have you found this election, and what have the people in the street been telling you in Motherwell and Wishaw, where you're standing as a constituency candidate as well as on the list?
Thanks, Roddy. Aye, very similar to what Eva was saying. When you take the time to explain to the people what the Alliance to Liberate Scotland's all about, independence, nothing less, when you explain that and explain how the system operates and how we can affect it if we can get in, they start to understand, they start to engage, and they engage positively. Because I think for too long they've seen that the kind of yaboo hiss politics, you know, and they're absolutely fed up with that. They're wanting constructive politics, but they want to see a better country coming out of this. And we had our chance in 2014. We know what happened and over the last decade, and that's why we are where we are now with Alliance to Liberate Scotland, because we're saying enough's enough. We can't keep going on like this, you know, and no having hope. So it's all about hope and them putting their trust in a new party. So when we engage with them, you definitely get a positive kind of feeling coming across for them. But what I'm also picking up though generally is there's an apathy out there with this election. There doesn't seem to be any sort of real engagement that there's a big election on the horizon here. You know, it's a massive election potentially, you know, with the potential rise of reform and all the rest of it that's going on. So we really need to grasp the bull by the horns here and go for it. And when we're asking the people that we talk to in the streets, you know, to put their trust in us, you know, and get normal people into that parliament, people that speak like them, that sound like them, that understand the day-to-day trials and tribulations that they all go through, you know. And that's what we're trying to get the message out to them, that we're ordinary people just like them. We're no career politicians. We're no in this gravy train. You know, we're in there to try and do the business. And the business is, as Eva says, is to try and get an independent Scotland at long last, let's try and get an independent Scotland, because by getting an independent Scotland, you know, it's immeasurable the amount of things that we could do that we can't do just now under devolution. So definitely there's positivity, but there's also an air of apathy, because I think the way this whole election has been kind of handled by the big parties, I don't know, there's been a bit of negativity for a lot of the parties, you know, all trying to do each other in, which doesn't help anybody. That's not the way to conduct yourself. But I think Alliance to Liberate Scotland, we've conducted ourselves in a positive manner, and that is starting to show when you talk to the ordinary people on the street, you know, and they start to understand what we're actually really all about. So I'm very pleased with it, Roddy, to be quite frank with you. I'm really pleased. And by the way, I think it's brilliant what everybody's done behind the scenes. You say Eva and Hazel and the rest of the team, the rest of yourselves with Prism. It's absolutely brilliant, because we're not getting any MSN, you know, any kind of TV coverage at all. So what we've managed to do is absolutely miraculous, to get the 38 candidates in the regions and the 14 on the constituency from humble beginnings, you know. And if only we had a few more months, even a few more weeks, you know, to really build momentum. Just think what could have happened to this election. But we are where we are, and I think we're doing well as a party, and I think it's coming across well in the streets.
Yeah, I'm going to come on soon, Phil, to a couple of polls that have come out this week, opinion polls. But on the campaign itself, you know, it's been, you know, quite right that we have fought, or should I say, the Alliance to Liberate Scotland, as Greg's alluded to, have fought a positive campaign. The other parties haven't, and as we're going to talk about this polling later, it's coming back to fighting, because the people are fed up. I mean, we're hearing now that the postal votes, I mean, and the postal was the easiest vote, but you're lucky for in Glasgow. I hear it's around about 50-odd%. You know, in some areas 60%, but there's hardly you know, it's down. It looks as if it's going to be a small turnout, and that is surely down to the parties and the media, who have made it negative the whole way.
Yeah, it's about disenfranchisement. What keeps the status quo is if people don't talk about politics and you don't ask them hard questions, and they're not put under pressure, and they're not asked to perform or deliver what they're supposed to deliver. In the case of SNP, it's supposed to be independence. We've not seen any move one step forward since 11 years. Since Nicola took over. So even Greg are on the money here. Vote for the person on the constituency, the lilac ballot, you think genuinely fights for independence. And they're rarer than you think. But on the list, which is the peach ballot, an SNP2 vote goes straight in the bin. And the polls, which we'll talk about later, are predicting 0 seats. Most of them are predicting 0 seats for SNP on the list. You are completely wasting your vote, SNP2. So why would SNP ask you to vote that for number 2? Nope. Well, I know, we won't talk about it here. So vote for Alliance to Liberate Scotland on the list ballot, then things will be just peachy. We've been a party for about 3 months, okay? And we've already won, because we are now on the map. Now, significantly, a big part of that, of Alliance to Liberate Scotland's rise to be the lead independence party, regardless of the result, because 3 months is an absurd period in which to run a campaign, is the sad demise of Alapa and the tragic loss of the best Scottish politician of my generation, certainly of our generation, Alex Salmond. So 3 months from starting a party, your first election, think about that. It is absurd, but I'm immensely proud of my colleagues within Alliance to Liberate Scotland, what we've achieved in such a short period of time. Incredibly, to achieve a party political broadcast when you're a 2-month-old party, it's staggering. It's nothing short of staggering. And reform is the big worry for me, and the move to the right. Why? The problem is when you've got low turnouts, again, we'll go into more detail later on, it could be as low as 30%. Then the extremists come out. The extreme voters come out. Those who are determined to see England continue to dominate Scotland, they'll come out. So the reform vote or the right wing will come out. And that troubles me, because we in Scotland are not extreme right wing, but they're on the rise, and particularly the unionists are good at playing for the list vote. They're good at playing the system. Think about Bear Together. All of them combining to defeat independence. We all know that SNP will win most constituency votes. But remember the 1.2 million list votes last Scottish election, that's the peach-coloured ballot paper, folks. SNP only got 2 seats for 1.2 million list votes. And the Unionists get the majority because under an electoral system imposed upon Scotland, this Staunch system, is designed to keep SNP down. When the only expectation there's only going to be one party, they made it impossible for SNP to get a majority until the one and only Alex Salmon broke the mould. John Swinney's not going to do it this time. Even Nicola Sturgeon says so. You know, and she failed time and time again. So the SNP winning the greater amount of constituency votes, which they will, because most people want independence and aren't paying that much attention about the detail of SNP, means the SNP list vote gets discounted. They don't count as much. And the Unionist votes, which do count because they've got less, they get in. They get weighted differently. And that's why you get more Unes on the list than you do in the constituency. Messy. But the turnout, again, will be low, and that's the danger. And we'll go into that when we talk about the polls, but that's the risk. The extremists come out and they vote.
But it's been a fact either since 2014, the pro-independence vote has been staying at home. It's more and more people. We know back in 2024 that something like 750,000 of the votes for the independence referendum stayed at home. And it's looking again like the votes going to, the SNP are going to win, and quite comfortably, I would imagine, and all the polling points to that. But there's an awful lot of people in favour of independence who are not going to vote. But on those polls, if I could start with it, there's been 2 this week, and I'll start with it. Today, the uber loyal Daily Record has pointed out that the Labour Party, which has spent a fortune, ladies and gentlemen, I'll come on to it in a minute, about what's been spent by the Alliance to Liberate Scotland. They spent a fortune. They've bought adverts on social media. They've promoted. They're going to be down to 13 seats, all list seats, ladies and gentlemen. So when you're voting SNP 1-2, you will be voting Labour and Reform, not just Reform, but Labour will get seats. And even Jackie Baillie will lose her seat. They won't get a single constituency seat. Now, if the Daily Record's telling you that, you know, that's a fact. They're not going to win a constituency, and they're only going to have 13 seats. This is the party that in my lifetime, and yours, Eva, dominated Scottish politics. And now 13 seats.
In my humble opinion, it's 13 seats too many.
I guess, yes.
Because the Labour Party have let the people of Scotland and the people of United Kingdom down time after time after time. And we've watched the spectacle develop, especially in the last few months, about who is it that's in charge of the Labour Party in Scotland. And you've got the pantomime where they call themselves that party that doesn't exist, the Scottish Labour Party. But ultimately, we know perfectly well Keir Starmer pulls the puppet strings of Anas Sarwar. And what really infuriated me the other day was that Sarwar's election stunt was to go out and drive some fancy fast car around a racetrack using the slogan that it was time for Scotland to change track. That is not the kind of performance or the focus that the ordinary people of this country either want or deserve. They want serious politicians who display competency and a bit of confidence, but certainly an understanding about the issues that really matter to folk. So when Anas Sarwar proudly proclaims that he's going to be the next First Minister, and all the sycophants round about him say the same thing, you ain't doing that on 13 seats, pal. So they deserve to be where they are because they've let people down, they've broken promises, and they thought they were fly at the time of the GRR debate by, in the main, not exclusively, but in the main, supporting the Scottish Government, supporting the SNP and assisting in voting through the gender recognition reform bill. And now that there's an election on the horizon, the Labour Party in Scotland have changed their mind and said that if they had it to do again, they would take different decisions. How disingenuous can you be? They're attempting to make that a vote catcher, knowing perfectly well
they
that
voted for it.
they voted for it They're just as responsible for it as the Alex Cole-Hamiltons of this world. And if you look at the reality is that the Labour Party in England, so Starmer's boss, has not rolled back on it, not to that extent. So I can only say puppet and puppet master, because that's all it is, because Labour are a branch office in Scotland of the London office. The answer for Sarwar to increase his own popularity is to come out in favour of Scottish independence. Because see, if he did, he might be in with a chance of being the First Minister one day. I don't want to see that day dawn, but it's a greater possibility for him than hanging in with the Unionist Labour Party as it is just now.
You shouldn't mention puppet masters in this podcast. Eva, we James Kelly be typing frantically now. See, they even admit it in their own show. Don't talk about puppet masters. But one of the things I've noticed, Greg, is that all of them are talking about vote for us to stop the SNP, Labour, Reform, Tories. That's what they're offering the Scottish people, and they wonder why there's a low turnout. So you don't vote for a negative. People don't get enthused by a negative, and that's all they have been. And yet they accuse the independence movement of being negative. I don't know how much more positive you can be when you say independence, which is positive. But it's their own fault. That's why the numbers are down.
Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly it. Nobody wants to hear negativity. Nobody wants to see these parties all going for each other's jugulars. And all that the Tories and the Labour Party and the Lib Dems and Reform are all doing, they're all focusing on the SNP, because the SNP is supposedly the main party for independence. So they're all focusing on them. But it's all negativity about getting the SNP out. And it shouldn't be that way in politics. You should be there to sell what it is as you stand for. So if they all stand for the United Kingdom of Great Britain and this great union that they all love, well, they should be selling that. They should be selling it in abundance, and people should be buying into it. But they haven't got anything positive to say about the union. So all they can then do is try and take any kind of shine off of the main SNP party or any other parties like Alliance. They attack all the independence movement, because that's all that they've got in them. It's just negativity, and the people in the streets are absolutely sick and scunnered and fed up with it, sick to the back teeth of the whole lot of them. So we're a new breath of fresh air on the scene, and that's what definitely that I'm picking up. That's the vibe I'm picking up when you speak to people, that they're interested, and a lot of people are really, hoping that we can make a breakthrough in this election, because that's what's needed. We need a wee bit of hope, and a wee bit of positivity, instead of all this old-fashioned type of politics. That's all they're doing. It's just negativity. Nobody likes that, as you say, Roddy.
No, they don't. I mean, Phil, when you were still an MP for the SNP in 2016, when we had a Holyrood election, if I had been speaking to you then and said, 10 years from now, Phil, the Labour Party will only get 13 seats, you'd have said, Roddy, have you been drinking again today? You wouldn't have believed it, how the mighty have fallen.
Yeah, but we understand how radically things, the swing-ometer busted so many times in 2015. It was scary. It was joyous at the same time, because it was a real kick back after. It was a result based upon the 2014 referendum result, and that the way people felt about losing when we had the chance to regain our country, and we thought, well, let's go for SNP, and it was really down. It was to Alex Salmond, all that work was done then. He handed the keys over to Nicola. We all know what she did with them. Promptly sold the golden keys to our country. But Labour were a force. Labour's have always been a force in Coatbridge, where I was the MP, Coatbridge, Christ and Bellshill. They used to weigh the vote, right? And it's like you didn't have to even ask the question. I think I can't remember where it came from, but a monkey in a red vest would have won for Labour, And it's become a wee bit like that. It did become a wee bit like that after.
The SNP.
There was a massive swing. There was a huge swing. There's about 14,000 swing away from Labour towards when we won it. The people that I worked with when we won it. In 2015, and then 16,000 majority that we had, and it went back the way just over that by about 1,000 in 2017 in the snap election. So these things are it blows in the wind. You just never know what's going to happen. But when you have a campaign such as the independence referendum that we had, that caught the imagination, the spirit, and it was a simple message: unify and free your country. And that's what we in Alliance to Liberate Scotland are trying to do right now. And this is with the frustration when you see, that great quote we all keep using about Robert Bonteen Cunningham Graham: the enemies of Scottish nationalism are not the English. Our real enemies are among us, born without imagination.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to name names, but those of us that are sniping it within, we have one policy: independence, nothing less. That was the whole concept behind the Yes movement. Yes, in the Yes, it was a movement for let us get our country back. And the broad church that we harnessed their efforts, their energies, we welcomed them in. As I said, I worked with Michael Fry, I worked with Liberal Democrats for independence, Labour for independence, and there was heated arguments. There was periods where people were saying, you're not a real socialist, or you're too left wing, or you're too this, you're too that. We'll figure all that out in the end, because I trust the people of Scotland. Do you, voter? Do you trust your fellow Scot? Because I get a lot of sense. I fully understand why people don't really get wrapped up in it, because they're so disenfranchised by the lies, the bullshit, and the blatant pettiness that you talked about earlier. Fighting each other, the boo-hoo, I'm a victim, you're all bad people. It's garbage. Grow a set. Let's stand up as human beings and support one another in a single cause, and talk to the person next to you. Talk to somebody in the street that has a different opinion. You might actually learn something. I grew up very, very much focused on left-wing politics, and I still remain certainly left of centre. But to hell with communism. And some of the politics I've picked up on, the right wing aren't always wrong and the left wing aren't always right, if you follow me. That's what I've learned, and it was a bitter lesson. And the reality is that we have to have a balanced society, and there will be something called the Overton window, which is the perspective. It's the range of views or perceptions in politics that a country or a people within a country hold to be acceptable with any snapshot in time. And where we are right now, that Overton window was moved deliberately to the right just prior to Thatcher getting involved, and ever since it's been creeping ever right. That is not Scotland. That's Britain. And that's what I fear most. That's why I trust Scotland to be more socialist, fair, and to create the kind of country that Eva and Greg and we all talk about on a daily basis, that we can be proud of, that looks after their own. And then when we put our own house in order, by God, we'll look out and look after others as well.
I'm a great believer, Eva, that there is a unionist ceiling vote. And it moves. I mean, it's all about stopping the SNP, stopping independence, and they go wherever they think they can do the most damage. They don't grow. That vote's not growing because there's not a positive case. They're not bringing people into their banner because they've got nothing positive to say. It was Ruth Davidson for a while. Oh, she was going to be the greatest thing, and they went to Ruth Davidson, and then they went, no, she's pretty rotten as well, and then they moved on. Yeah, and then they go to Labour. Now they're going to Reform. They're clutching at straws. The union is breaking, and if only the independence movement would unite, it's there for the taking.
There's a myriad of reasons why the union is breaking down. But it's predominantly because 2014 was such an education for the people of Scotland. There were so many efforts by so many people in very many different organisations to educate and invigorate and encourage and motivate the people of Scotland to seriously consider, why can't we do this? Why have we not done it? The whole world knows we're a country, not a county. We were independent before. Why are we not independent now? What are the benefits of independence? And so you had the economic arguments, you had the arguments about pensions, but most of all, that 2014 campaign did what Alex Salmond said, and we talk about him all the time for all the right reasons. It made the people of Scotland walk tall, and we believed in ourselves. We really thought, we can do this. And not only can we break away from the Union, we can make a success of Scotland, because we've got the resources, the greatest of which will always be the potential of our people. And it's understood now by the majority of Scots that we should be an independent nation. We should be able to vote to become an independent nation again. And when we do that, our country will prosper. That is the general feeling within a majority of the population. And those are the reasons why another independence referendum granted by Westminster, like the 2014 one, will never, ever happen, because it would be an overwhelming majority in favour of independence.
Yes.
And that leads us to, well, what other way or ways is or are there in which we can achieve our independence, which is where we come in.
Mm-hmm.
We come in as the vote for your country, the vote with your heart that I spoke about earlier, because there's an insidious development occurring in British politics. It was touched on earlier about right-wing factors. So I'll give you an honest appraisal of a recent experience of ours. On Saturday, when we were in the Parliament Walk in Alloa campaigning, I was speaking to men and women from one of the local churches. And all these people are comparatively recent immigrants into Scotland. They all had nice wee blethers with them about their church and about politics, and it was all very, very decent and very kind. And then we went our separate ways. And about 10 minutes later, another woman, also an immigrant, joined their group and then came over to speak to me. And what she said was she wanted to know more about our party, and in particular, she wanted to know whether we were immigrant friendly. And I could have cried, because she should never have had to ask that question. And obviously I explained to her, immigration is reserved to Westminster. Scotland doesn't have those powers. We won't get those powers until we're an independent country. But that woman and those around her contribute very much to our country. They should not be made to feel unwelcome here, to the extent where they're asking political campaigners whether or not we're immigrant friendly. So for all the reasons that we enumerate every week, we've got to get away from that union. It has become soiled, I think would be the word that I would use. And the people of Scotland are not other or different or special. We're just human, and mainly humanitarian. And think what a beacon of hope, not just a welcoming Scotland, but a decent Scotland would be in the world, a peace-loving, peacekeeping nation. And in terms of, or in economic terms, we know the birth rate's been falling. We know our population is ageing. We know that we need more labour than we've currently got for those reasons. So we should be immigrant friendly. Why wouldn't we be? Because Scots for centuries have emigrated either by force or for economic reasons. So I hope that the people of Scotland understand on Thursday that if they vote for the Alliance, they can create that independent future for us and can create the country that is the one that we should have been all these years.
I mean, we were an independent country for 1,000 years, and it's only the last 318 years we've been in a union. We've had more time independent than dependent. And this polling that's come out this week, there's been a couple of polls, Greg. One of them says that, we're saying there's going to be an SNP majority. Other ones are saying they'll fall short, but with the Greens will get, they're saying somewhere between 57 and 66 seats for the SNP. The Tories will get 12 seats. The Greens will get 10 seats. Reform on 22 will be the opposition. And as we've said, the Labour on 13. They haven't any seats for us in there, but we might just frighten them and change that a wee bit. They might just get the shock of their life. But the fact is that there's going to be an independence majority, whether it's us and the SNP. or the independence isn't a red line for us Greens. But when John does, let's say John goes to Westminster and says, right, we've got majority, the people of Scotland have voted, here's the democratic wishes of the Scottish people, we want a referendum. What do you think Keir Starmer's going to say to him, Greg? Don't use bad language before the watershed.
Quite obvious he's going to say no and no again, and he'll keep saying no for any other ones after that if we're still in this situation. The problem that we've got, as we all know, is that John Swinney has come up with this plan for SNP 1 and 2, which is Phil broke down and explained they'll get 0 list seats, so the 2's a complete waste. 1.2 million votes, complete waste. But fundamentally and crucially, they've turned around and said this is a single party majority we're looking for. If they'd turned around and said this is a cross-party independence supporting MSPs, you know, for a super majority, if they'd put it out like that for a plebiscite election, just think where we would be then. I think that any apathy that's out there amongst independentistas, amongst us all, I think it would have all just fizzled away. I think everybody would have been open arms with us, you know, with that sort of campaign for a yes movement plebiscite. But we are where we are. So if the SNP, and going with the kind of averages of the polls, it looks like, yeah, they're going to win the vast majority of the constituency seats. Will they win their single party majority? I don't think so. It's looking no very likely they'll get that. Now, they might be very, very close, but I don't think they'll get their single party majority that they were aiming for. So it then leaves the question, who are they going to join up with? So the Greens just recently there came out with a statement about we're not prepared to work with SNP because of their oil policy. Okay, so that's just one policy area, but in a week, we're only a week at a time running up to this election for them to come out and say that, you know, it doesn't give confidence if you're thinking about voting SNP 1 and Greens 2. It doesn't give you any confidence that the two parties are aligned with each other, you know, and then you're putting a lot of trust and a lot of faith that they're going to join as a coalition down the line. So this is where Alliance to Liberate Scotland come in. So if the second votes, if all the SNP people, all the true independentistas, the real people that want independence for the country, you know, use your heart like Eva says, let's fight for our country and vote for our country. Let's get the Alliance to Liberate Scotland candidates in on that list seat en masse. You never know, we might just be able to have enough people along with the Greens, you know, potentially, and along with anybody else that gets in that's of an independence persuasion. You never know, we might even be able to get to that 2/3 supermajority that's in the Scotland Act to be able to affect and using mechanisms that's there, you know, to call another election, but this time make it a Scottish Declaration of Independence election, you know, because we know that Westminster's just always going to say no.
Absolutely. Well, on the oil, I find it ridiculous. Two things about the Greens saying about your position in the oil. Oil and gas is reserved. The Scottish Government doesn't actually have any say over that. That's half the bloody problem. And the Tories are saying the same in Reform. Oh, the SNP are terrible on oil and gas. Well, we don't control it. It's Miliband down in London that controls it. It's him that's saying no more drilling. And I'm saying, actually, I've said it on here before, and I'll say it again, I don't want us to drill for any just now. Not because I'm an environmentalist or a thing. I just want to keep it all for us when we're independent. All the more for us if we don't drill now, baby. Don't drill. And the other one is that it was only a few months ago that the Green Party, Gillian Mackay, turned around and said, her and Ross Greer, we don't want you to vote for us if you don't believe in the trans ideology. If you don't believe in that, we don't want your vote. Really? So if you don't believe that men can be women and women can be men if they want, they don't even want your vote. Independence is not a red line for them. They want you to have no oil, no gas, no plastic, no syringes, no medicine, anything. There's 6,000 products come from oil, ladies and gentlemen. It's not just the fuel in your car or the fuel in your heating system. 6,000 different products with oil. Anyway,
it's madness.
On you go, Phil.
It's absolute madness. I mean, the Greens, we'll go into the polls in a wee bit, but to not use oil and gas to get the 1 in 4 kids currently in poverty in Scotland, to get them out of poverty, is criminal. And a woman, news just in, is an adult human female. Full stop. And, you know, the Herald article, this goes way back. The Greens were open to going into government with unionist parties in Holyrood. And this is in October of 2023. And it was Lorna Slater that said it. And she said that the Greens could prop up a unionist government in Holyrood, opening the door to potentially Anna Sarmar as the First Minister. And she at the time was the co-leader, right? And she said that independence is not a red line for her party going into cooperation with other parties at Holyrood. And then in August 21, the Greens and the SNP, both pro-Indy parties, signed the Butte House Agreement, giving them First Minister Nicola Sturgeon a majority government at Holyrood. That was just 2 years before. So the two parties, you know, if you get a chance at power, this is the problem. When you get a chance at power, oh how your position changed. Independence is not a red line for us. Remember that, because John Curtis at the time said this could hurt their independence credentials and potentially votes. Now, I liked Ross Greer when I worked with him in the 2012-2014 independence referendum. And in fairness, he's got a wee bit more nous about him economically than most MSPs. But how can you, Ross, be so vociferous about Indy back then and then put your party before your country? Sorry, Ross, that's exactly what the Greens are doing. And that's why you will jump on any bandwagon if it gives you power. But that's not what the Alliance to Liberate Scotland would do. Because unlike you, Ross, and the rest of the Greens, we're interested in outcomes, not incomes. And when you look back on the polls that have come in, I had a quick look. And, you know, can you trust them? What's going to be right? I mean, I looked at More in Common, Northstat, Survation, Find Out Now, the different survetions at different times from the last one being 4th of May right up to from the 5th of April. You know, so quite close run thing. And it's going from like anything between 33 for the SNP and 26. You know, in Labour, anything from 12 to 17. And Reform, that's the worrying one. The worrying one, the recent polls are now putting Reform much, much higher, up at 22. And you know, and they're at least in the high teens. And you're thinking, with the imbalance we have on the list vote, that's the thing that gives the unionists power. And if they get their act together, like they did in remember the Better Together campaign? That was the unionists playing the system to defeat us. That's what it was. That's what they do. It's their system. They set the rules. We play by their rules. We will continue to lose. So that's why we have got to break this mould. And how you break that mould is you start by getting representatives who want independence into the Scottish Parliament. And right now, with the sad demise of Alapa, that leaves us. And, you know, and the fact that this is our first campaign, our first election, and it's less than 3 months in from being created, I mean, really, normally you would say zero chance. Normally, you would say zero chance. The thing that's hurting us most is getting the two key messages out there, because the mainstream media aren't going to tell you. The parties won't tell you. The mainstream parties won't tell you, because they want you to be disenfranchised. They want you to think the only option is the usual suspects. But the fact that the list vote is being played completely by the unionists, and if you vote SNP2, you get unionists. I'll say it again, the majority of polls currently show the SNP list vote as being zero. Now, if I go back, see if you analyse this, if you want to understand where this comes from. I mean, like, you look at some of our people, you go to Tommy or Craig or Eva or Greg or anybody, you listen to what they're saying, read their leaflets. I mean, you're trying to convince SNP supporters across Scotland about how this works. It's difficult, but there was a poll, okay, that was carried out. And when the introduction, and this is the thing, there's a caveat to this, when the Alliance to Liberate Scotland's existence was explained, because we're not getting reported in the mainstream media, we're not getting talked about, we're not getting promoted, we were getting 78% on the national polls conducted by Find Out Now. Now, that would be miraculous. That would be absolutely miraculous, because that would get our people elected. Now, in 3 months, again, the odds are so stacked against you. But if our name is out there and people know what we do, and what we do is, well, it's exactly what it says in the tin. We're here to liberate Scotland. And they know how the DeHont system works. That figure can only rise. That's what Alapa was rising on. That's what Alex's plan was. And why was it Alex's plan? Because it's up to the independence family of what happens in this election. Either you waste your regional vote and re-elect useless unionists, or you vote Alliance to Liberate Scotland and elect independence champions, as Tommy said. Now, he went on to cite, in 2007, the SNP gets 633,611 list votes and 26 list seats. Not too shabby. In 2011, the SNP got 876,420 list votes and 16 list seats. Not so good. 2016, the SNP got 953,587 list votes and 4 on the list. What the hell's going on here? And then in 2021, the SNP got 1 million, and I was a wee bit exaggerating earlier at 0.3, it was from memory, 1,094,374 list votes and only got 2 list seats. And the current polls say in 2026, the SNP will get absolutely no list seats. Even though, now you can see the pattern forming here. This is the system. It's risen from just over 600,000 to over 1 million in 2021, yet the list seats continue to collapse from 26 down to 2, and it's going to be 0 or damn close to 0. So the more dominant the SNP becomes in the constituencies, because of that imbalance we talk about, the less impactful your vote for SNP is on the list, which is why Alex Salmond was 100% right when he said, don't vote SNP2, it's a wasted vote. But I'll create Alapa to try and persuade and illustrate to people that this is how we get our independence. But we have to force the SNP to go along with us. Why wouldn't then John Spinney, Humza Useless and Herr Sturgeon continue to push SNP1 and SNP2? Well, you could send answers on a postcard, but I'll give you it right now, because they're working for the unions, because they're basically the evolutionists. They're happy with their snouts in the trough. We've known this for a very long time. We knew it when Alex was in power. We were going to try and do something about it. The thing that broke it is when Alex actually got a majority with SNP, which was completely unplanned for. It's never been done since, and it will probably never be done again. It's not going to happen again. It's not going to happen again. They'll make sure that they got sloppy, like they did in the 2014 election. So that's why you can't trust the SNP leadership. SNP friends and members that I'm still very, very friendly with, some of the representatives I still have time for, still talk to, but the fact that you've had in your snout in the trough for 11 years when 1 in 4 kids in Scotland nearly have been in poverty, and you've done nothing to change that, not good enough. I'm sorry. But you all must suffer here, but primarily the leadership. That's who must carry the blame for us still being tied to in this union of unequals.
The reason why they got more list seats, as you were talking about there, Phil, was that time Labour was stronger in the constituencies as well. They were almost like that in the constituency, the two of them, and so that's why they won more seats, because they didn't win as many seats in the constituency. They're going to run amok in the constituency. However, Eva, those polls have come up with a couple of seats for reform. I mean, the SNP weren't going to win all the constituency seats, but the polls are suggesting that they might win Ayr, reform that is, and the Bamshire and Buchan Coast, which is an SNP seat as well. They might win those two. But on the other side, people like Jackie Baillie, who's got a huge majority and a huge... Jackie Baillie, she's going to lose her seat in Clydebank. So Reform are going to win a couple of seats there. It's quite incredible what's been here. The Greens might win their first past the post seat in Glasgow. Kelvin Mary Hill, what used to be the Glasgow Hill head seat. My mother will be turning in her grave. You know, and the hope was that they thought that Lorna Slater might win in Edinburgh, but it looks like their one seat they could win will be in Glasgow. Do any of these amaze you?
I'm actually laughing here because there's a unionist lawyer, and I would call him
more than one.
he's just tweeted that me saying you get a super majority, you have a majority of the popular vote and a majority of MSPs, and that entitles you to talk about UDI, and he says that's wrong. But he's one of the guys that would deny us another referendum.
Is he a Philadelphia lawyer, perchance?
I think West of Scotland. I think he watches as well. So hi, Al. What were you asking me, Roddy, about the Labour losing seats?
Yeah, I'm saying that the Reform are down to win a seat in the Ayr, they figure, and in Bamshire and Buchan Coast, the Karen Adams seat, that is, I believe, that the Reform might win those 2 seats, and that the Greens, Glasgow, Kelvin, and Maryhill, could go to the Greens.
Right, Banff and Buchan has always obviously had quite a big Tory vote.
Tory vote, yeah.
So it's no surprise that Karen Adams' seat might be in jeopardy because of her conduct, especially, around the GRR stuff. Ayr will be Siobhan Brown, who didn't really give a magnificent account of herself and her conduct as a junior minister either. So those 2, wee bit anecdotally, possibly don't represent a national wave, if you like, of reform as such, because there'll be individual aspects of those constituencies and those candidates that explain or justify part of that loss of support. But what is evident on the streets, speaking to people, is disappointment in the SNP and anger with Labour. Because obviously, as we've said already, the general election 2 years ago led to the Labour surge and the loss of very many SNP seats. People were obviously scunnered with what was happening in Scotland, gave their vote to Labour, hoped for something better, didn't get it. So in the main, the people of Scotland have been let down repeatedly by Labour, by the SNP, by Labour again, and now they're looking, thinking, where am I going here? What do I do? And it's the constitutional carrot that keeps people voting SNP. It's no longer the competent government that it was with Alex Salmond. And sometimes you meet people very briefly for a few moments and you have a conversation with them and they stick in your mind and you go back and you replay it. And I tend to wonder what they feel like when they go home, what they think about, what worries them, what makes them happy. And met a young lad on Saturday. Again, this was in the High Street in Alloa. Lovely, polite, clean, tidy young man. He was looking after his wee brother. They were walking up the street and the young lad was maybe 20, 22, something like that. His wee brother was maybe 12. Looked like the big brother had just collected the wee brother from football or something. And we got talking and we were speaking about Scotland and independence and the Scottish football team and the World Cup. And I said, what do you do with yourself? I didn't do anything. And I said, what do you mean? I'm looking for work. What would you like to do? I'd like to be a plumber or I'd like to be a builder, but I would actually quite like to be a joiner. And it was another of these instances where I just could have cried because he should be a joiner or a plumber or a builder. And if the SNP government had taken the advice of Alec Neil 2 years ago, we would be building houses in Scotland and solving problems for that young lad who's keen to work, wants to work. And that is what we've got in Scotland now. We've got a generation who are being denied the opportunity to realise their own potential. And it's stories from individuals like that that politicians elected to both Holyrood and Westminster need to hear. They need it drummed into their skulls so that they understand that their job is not to look after themselves. It's to make the country what it should be. So that was a salutary experience, but far from being a unique one. There was a woman that I spoke to who was explaining about difficulties in the context of getting social care or care at home arrangements made for a relative. Because council cuts or, shortage of staff and that kind of thing. in an independent Scotland, we wouldn't be paying for weapons of mass destruction on the Clyde. There'd be money and resources available to pay decent wages, to provide sufficient carers or care homes or facilities or services. All these things come with independence. But it's not going to happen with Devo or Devo Max, or if Reform Forum, the next government at Westminster in Scotland's not independent. You can look forward to powers being stripped away from Holyrood as opposed to powers all being in Holyrood with independence. So, you know, the landscape at times is very bleak. There's hope that we've all spoken about, but it doesn't happen as if by magic. It doesn't happen if you don't vote. It doesn't happen if you don't vote the right way. So if you think Scotland should be independent, just make both votes indie. If you're in mid-Scotland and Fife, if you fancy the chances of your SNP constituency candidates, if you want to vote for them, please yourself. But please give me your list vote. And you can consider things from that perspective in every region of Scotland, because the Alliance is standing for independence in every region. So yes, I would like to be elected on the constituency. So would Greg. So would so many others of us. But just get us in there one way or the other. And we will, like I said the other day, metaphorically upend the tables and throw over the chairs and be talking about real cogent action towards our independence, not as a carrot dangled for some later date, or, you know, not jam today, but jam tomorrow. We want and we deserve and we require jam today.
Absolutely. Something else that's just happened yesterday, and it's I've been talking about today. We've got so much money. Everything's so perfect in the UK, and we've got, you know, lousy pensions, no kids in starvation. But the UK government is joining the EU's 78 billion, folks, not million, 78 billion loan scheme for Ukraine. We've already given them 29 billion to a fascist regime, but we're joining in to give them another to help out with 78 billion. And yet we've got the worst pensions in the world. We've got kids in poverty. We've got kids that can't get a job. We've got a lack of housing. We've got, you know, the NHS in desperation for more funding. But no. But they can find money for weapons of mass destruction, or helping the Israelis committing a genocide, or giving the Ukraine a hand with 78 billion. It would make enough to make you cry. And talking on money, I would just like to say here and now, and Techie maybe will run along the bottom, the crowdfunder thing. We have started from scratch, and in 3 months, we put out a national leaflet, which a lot of parties that have been around for 5, 6, 10 years, who say they're independence parties or whatever, have not done it. It cost us £25,000. This is a self-funding party, ladies and gentlemen. We've had some great money from donations from you, but it was £25,000 for that alone, one leaflet. And we've got posters out there, and we've got billboards, and we've developed our app, which is for our canvassing app. All that's costing money. We're short. We haven't got enough, and we're needing help. So if you've got any spare cash, help us, because we're trying to help the country, and that's what we're trying to do. So if you can throw in a couple of quid, many a mickle makes a muckle, as they say. Greg, another one of the ones I was talking about, the polls, it shows this one that the SNP will get a majority. They're saying this was the MRP poll, which was accurately forecast the 2014, and this was just on 2 days ago, where they say they're on track to win 66 seats. So let's be positive and say they win their 66 seats, and then John does what he says, which will be on the Monday morning after he becomes the First Minister again. Then he will prepare to apply for a Section 30. Now, I've said it on here, I'm going to say it again. Shouldn't he say right to Westminster, well, we want a Section 30 referendum, which I don't agree with the referendum, folks. I think they can fiddle it too easily. I think we should do it by a plebiscite election, but let's just go with it, the referendum, and say, and if you don't give us it, we're going to dissolve this Parliament, and we're going to have an independence plebiscite. And if that, you've got to have a carrot and a stick. And Westminster needs a stick.
Yeah, exactly. That's the art of negotiation. You can't go into negotiations weak. You've got to always have something up your sleeve. So that's basically what the SNP, they've failed on that one task, is to hold basically a gun to the heads of Westminster and say to them, you know, if you don't give us what we want here, obviously I'm the same as yourself, Roddy. I don't agree with having to have a second bite at the cherry. If you've voted, let's say they get their single party majority bill, that's it. They've got their majority. They're a majority government. They've got the majority vote from the people of Scotland. So it's a done deal. You know, yeah, people could argue down the line and say it should have been more, it should have been 2/3 and come out with all different sort of things, right? But at the end of the day, a majority is a majority. But if he's then going to go cap in hand to Keir Starmer or whoever might be in power and ask for a Section 30, which we know they're not going to give us, every single one of the Prime Ministers has said no, and we just know that's their position on this. So yeah, you've got to be able to have something up your sleeve to then pull it and say, right, well, that's it then. Name here, Mr. Nice Guy. This is what we're going to do, and we'll see what happens after that. You can take us to court, you can threaten us, you can do whatever you want, but we're sovereign, and use all the ancient laws that we've still got. The 1689 claim of right, you know, the Declaration of Growth. You go right back, you know, use every single thing that we've got that's written down that shows that we're sovereign in Scotland, and use that to get our independence. And that's where we would come in. If there was enough of us in the Parliament, we're not going to go in there just to be a thorn in the side of the SNP, just for the sake of being a thorn in the side. No, we're getting in there for one purpose only, is to try and push for independence. So if the SNP puts out the hand of friendship, and we're putting out the olive branch as well, and we meet in the middle somewhere and we say, we've all got the same agenda here, the same commonality, we want independence, then we'll work together for that. We can disagree on everything else under the sun, but as long as we get this over the line, because back to what Eva was saying there about the young folk in the country are in the biggest electrical, mechanical and plumbing branch in Scotland for Unite the Union. And we constantly have to deal with apprenticeships and people that can't get a start, can't get a foot on the step to an apprenticeship, and all the different kind of the skullduggery that goes on there, you know, with some of the old employers. By the way, a lot of the small, medium enterprise size employers are decent employers. They're all family businesses, but you do get a few rogues. And that's something that we need to remember too in Scotland. Scotland is now a service sector industry. That's its majority base now. We're no heavy industry anymore. We're not getting massive manufacturing or textiles. We don't have any car making places. We don't have Cummins engineering up in Shotts. We don't have Chrysler or in Paisley, you know, or Linwood. We don't have anything like that anymore. So we're a service sector economy. That's not healthy, just having that type of economy. It's got to be a balanced economy. You've got to have a bit of everything to make an economy work. And when you're in a service sector economy like that, you then end up with it's just all crumbs getting put to small subcontractors and small businesses. So it's the SMEs. Scotland's an SME country. Small, medium employers. That's what the Scottish economic base is by majority. So then that's where all the problems start to kick in. When the youngsters are trying to get a start as an apprenticeship, funding has to come in because these small, medium employers just don't have the money to pay for a 4-year apprenticeship. You know, so they're looking for funding off the government. And I know right now there's a lot of issues with the Scottish government and their agency that helps to get the money out there. There needs to be more money put across to these small, medium employers because they're the backbone of the economy now. You know, and until we get independence and break the shackles here and become a proper independent country like Denmark or Norway, one of these kind of normalised small countries in Europe, once we get to that stage and we can start bringing investment in, and we can start building our own stuff again, having manufacturing, textile, kind of our own car manufacturing, you know, and all the rest of it goes along with it. We could even Ardesir with the Chinese firm that was planning to do wind turbines up Ardesir. We could reopen or build a brand new Grangemouth, for instance.
Absolutely.
We could do anything. We could absolutely do anything. You know, it's a blank page we start with. So until we do that, that's where we need to get to, because this vicious circle of devolution and this vicious circle of being inside the United Kingdom isn't working for us, and we've been asset stripped, and we've had a scorched earth policy, and it's happening right now with Mossbourne and Grangemouth. The Ardesir no happening, you know, and you can rhyme them all off, and they go right back 40 years. All the industries that have all collapsed under this UK. You know, with Rosyth and everything, with the submarines that were all getting built, and it all went down to, was it Portsmouth that all went down to in the 90s? You know, it's one thing after another. Aye. We've lost everything. any sort of base of heavy industry in Scotland, and we need to start bringing all that back, because only in normal countries do you have that balanced sort of economy, with a balance of heavy industry, medium industry, and small medium employers. You can't just have a whole economy running like this, which is basically based on local authority money, and that's why it's a kind of basket case, the Scottish economy, in this devolved situation, because it's all coming for the local authorities. There should be a bigger balance here, with the outside investment coming in, because
Absolutely.
we're sitting here ripe for the outside investment with the resources we've got, and as we've all said, the people are our biggest resource.
Absolutely. The one thing, Phil, I remember Lloyd said this. Now, I remember the days of when I was in the SNP, we were called fundamentalists and gradualists. John Swinney and Sturgeon and all them and Angus, they're all in the gradualist. I was a fundy. I'm proud to say it, and still a fundamentalist. And I would suggest that the people in the Alliance to Liberate Scotland are all fundamentalists. But Lloyd told us a great story when he was just a new rookie MSP and very nervous, and he saw my great hero coming down the hall, the first speaker, Winifred Ewing, the great Winnie Ewing. And she used to say to him every day, "What have you done to advance the cause of independence today, Mr. Quinnan?" And he said he was terrified. He used to say, "But sheer company, he would jump out the way, or he'd have something ready." I want to see Alliance to Liberate Scotland, the members of the Scottish Parliament, when every time they stand up and say to the First Minister, to one of the other Cabinet Secretaries, your question, "What have you done today to advance the cause of Scottish independence?" That should be the first question every single day and everything, and then your supplementary comes in. That's what we should be doing in that Parliament every day, Phil.
Oh, I totally agree, and the problem is that spirit, that fire is long gone. The Margot McDonald's. I mean, I'm reminded of this because I was at an event with Jim Sellers, and this is about taking responsibility. And 1 in 4 in poverty, okay, almost worst pension in Europe, education and NHS in tatters, despite the fine efforts of our educationalists and healthcare specialists, right? And I was at the Yes United and Independence Forum Scotland event at Oranmore on the 14th of March, which was a magnificent unification event attended by many, many independent supporting organisations, including the Alliance to Liberate Scotland. We were there in some numbers. Now, the young man looking for work story that Eva talked about reminded me about this. Jim Sellers' speech at the end, which is magnificent. I would urge you to look it out. It was 88 and he brought the roof down. Absolutely stunning. And he quoted a stat that made me ashamed and angry. And it was around, I think it was 20, I'm sure it was 25% of young Scots do not see a positive future ahead for them. That is disgraceful. That disgusts me, man. It should disgust us all, and we need to take responsibility. We're responsible for this. This is on our watch. This happened. We've not delivered it. We didn't get our independence. Well, I went down in 2015 and we failed. SNP have failed. Completely failed to do what they said in the tin. It no longer even says it on the tin. It used to say that we're about independence, nothing less. In SNP, that was the Prime Directive. No longer says that. We need to force the SNP. But we need, and I'm now working with this group, right? The Yes United and Independence Forum Scotland, particularly Energy Scotland, on a draft manifesto that any independentista can take round the doors and show the folk of Scotland the kind of country we can build. And I'm excited about the brilliant people involved, not just Jim Sellers. He's passing the baton on to the next generation. We need this manifesto. We need an electoral event. We need a second party like Alliance to Liberate Scotland. We need all the components to pull together an organised effort to deliver our independence, structured, and none of the egos get involved. Forget your pettiness, forget the big I am. You do not know everything. We need to talk to each other and listen. We need to also force the SNP to unify the independence family as we did in 2014. And to date, they are not interested. Even Alex Salmon couldn't persuade these imposters at the head of the SNP, Swinney, Useless, Robertson, Sturgeon, et al., who have no place, in my view, in Scotland's political future as an independent country. Greg, you mentioned MSMs, right? and medium-sized, and there's a lot of small and medium-sized enterprises that are about. They were at one time providing 50% of all jobs. I doubt that's the case now, because it's mostly big Amazon jobs and massive big call centres and stuff like that. But it desperately needs investment, and that means taking control of your own country and providing tax incentives, amongst others, to ensure that our children have futures they can look forward to and be proud of. And that is down to us. And there were so many positives when we were there. When you talk to people who genuinely have independence at heart, there's a lot of successful business people, a lot of good companies and good electrical and plumbing and organisations that Greg was talking about. I think it was electricians. And they want to do the best. These are people who've working class, who've usually come up through the ranks, tradesmen and women who've worked their way up. And they see if you've got the right attitude, that's great. But say if you're born into poverty, your peer pressure is drug abuse, is vandalism, is substance abuse. It's sickening to think that we have stooped so low to be in a state that we are in, and that there is no rage. That rage against the machine isn't everywhere. We should be on the streets, and one of the things you can do, folks, is get out there tomorrow and vote for Alliance to Liberate Scotland. As Eva said, and Greg have said at the start, on the peach ballot, there is only one choice: Alliance to Liberate Scotland. We will unify. Anybody else who thinks they're whatever they think they're doing, and they refuse to speak to anybody else except everybody that agrees with their tiny little view of the world, wake up. Remember the joy that we had in 2014. Remember the unification that was the Yes movement. That's what we're trying. That's what we're recreating here. The door is always open. The hand is always out. The drawbridge is always down. You are welcome. When we move on here, we will be in pole position as the lead independence party. No matter how small that percentage is, it'll be us, and it will be smaller than it should have been, primarily because we've only 3 months to do this, because of what we're up against, and also because of the sniping that we see. See if you're criticising other independentistas, please think before you speak. Please. Because if somebody's trying and wanting and saying, well, I think we should do it this way, well, okay, have a talk to them, listen to them. There are some out there who refuse to talk to anybody and say, I'm the Grand Vizier of political strategic thinking, really? And you have a wee chat, I've listened to a few of them, and I think, well, why are you not supporting unification? Why are you shooting down anybody who disagrees with you, even slightly, because their policies are slightly different than yours? Do you not trust, like me, I trust the Scottish people to make the right decisions in the future? Because we've built magnificent, the Scottish Enlightenment, we had 5 universities when England had 2, all this stuff we've invented, the claim of right that Greg mentioned earlier, the whole philosophy, we're like, you go, I work in America a lot, and it's like, oh, we love you, you're all wonderful, we'll aye, right, is that right? It's like we're self-effacing. And sometimes we do ourselves down too much. But for me, what's absolutely critical here is we need to get this show on the road. And this is just the start. This is the first step that Alliance to Liberate Scotland has taken. And we will grow. Do you know, I think, I can't remember, Roddy, but you confirm it. Tell you the impact we had. You see all these kind of small parties that are out there that think they know the best and everybody's going to rally your banner, right? We I think you spent a couple of days doing this, deleting about 700 bot account memberships. We've deleted 700 memberships, okay, because the union is bots. Who are they frightened of now?
Yeah. But the other thing is all these people with you're not purist. I've had one guy who I've known for years. You're not pure because you're in a coalition with other people who are of the right, and you're supposed to be of the left. Right? Oh, balderdash. Without independence, all those wee things you like, folks, can't be done. We can tinker around the edges, but we can't make significant changes and improve things significantly without all the levers of power, finance, and everything that we can do. So set that aside. Independence, nothing else. Independence, nothing less. That's why we set it up as such. We're finished. Tomorrow, polling starts. Eva, I would like you to have the last word before we go tonight, to whip up the voters there that are watching us today.
The SNP announced a policy, I think it was last week, where if they're re-elected, they're going to give every child starting primary one in primary school, obviously, a school bag. What I would rather do is encourage people to vote for Liberate Scotland and give everybody in Scotland the opportunity not to choose a school bag, but to create and mould and achieve their own destiny, because that's what independence does. And we would look like Norway within a few years. We might not have a massive oil fund that quickly, but we could have that wind fund, wave fund, food banks and baby banks and school clothing banks would be things of the past. No longer would pensioners be worrying about eating or heating. We wouldn't have the difficulties that we've got in the care system. You wouldn't see that your work colleagues, for example, were talking about drawing down money from their pensions to pay for an artificial hip or an artificial knee or a cataract operation because the NHS waiting list was a wee bit too long to be able to thole. But overall, most of all, we would have that national pride as we watch the saltire being unfurled at the United Nations between Saudi Arabia and Senegal. And we wouldn't be patting each other on the back, we'd be lifting a toast and saying, we're nae better and we're nae worse than anybody else. We are all Jock Tamson's bairns. So that is why I believe in independence, so that the people of Scotland are equal to every citizen of every other republic on the planet.
And to you, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed this and I hope you're ready to go and vote. And I'm going to ask you, when you come out of that polling station, what have you done today to advance the cause of independence? I hope it's to have supported the Alliance to Liberate Scotland. See you on the other side. Take care now.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.